Good day. And it's a nice day today, so have a good time. Today we have Amy Sheldon with us to talk to us about what's going on in the legislature. A lot of things going on in the legislature.
It's a busy time of year in the legislature.
Because it's coming to an end.
It's coming to an end. It's the second year of a biennium.
Yeah.
Things are going fast.
So you have to have, everything has to pass. It's not like the first part of a biennium. The next time you meet, you can take up the same issues.
That's right.
Or finish up issues. But this time, they're all ended.
That's right. They have to either make it to the finish line or start over again next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are some big things happening.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us about some of them?
Yeah, actually, maybe I'll just start with, we were just talking about guns. I think the gun legislation is pretty significant, and I know people here in Middlebury care a lot about it. On Wednesday at 2 o'clock, the governor is going to sign 3 different bills that address gun safety measures. The first one is S55, and it increases the age to purchase a gun to 21 unless you have previous training. Meaning military or hunter safety kind of training, or you're in the you're a police officer.
And you have to prove that.
Yeah, you would have to prove that to buy the gun. Increases it what's called universal background checks. Right now, if you buy a gun at a gun dealer, you need to go and you have to get a federal universal background check. But this extends background checks to private gun sales. It would also ban what's called bump stocks, which are those, I don't even know what they are, devices you put on a gun that make them fire multiple rounds rapidly. Also limits the size of magazine limits. A different bill allows someone who's found to be a potential harm to themselves or others, that allows the police to take their gun away for a short amount of time. And then the final provision is the domestic violence bill, which the House actually passed last year, speaking of unfinished business. And that allows the police, in instances of an emergency call for a domestic violence, to remove guns that they find on the scene. Many of the deaths in Vermont related to gun violence are domestic violence. So those are some, we think, common sense steps that will help prevent Death by gun in Vermont. Yeah, so that's big. More recently, a couple weeks ago, I got to go to the 62nd Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations, which was really exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where was that held?
It was, well, right in the United Nations Plaza is the main conference. It's a 10-day conference. I only went to one day. I was invited to speak at a breakout session on rural women in agriculture and the legislature's role in sustainability initiatives, sustainability and inclusivity, I guess, initiatives. And it was really interesting. A couple things were interesting. As a prior legislator, you'll appreciate that during this busy time of the session, I was able to take 5 minutes really and step out and look at my work in the State House and think about what has made Vermont a leader in sustainability and inclusivity. And actually my head went right to Act 250. It was sort of our first statute that addressed both sustainability and inclusion. And if you think about it, we were thinking about the long-term viability of our landscape almost 50 years ago, and then we also did it by engaging citizens in the process. So it is an inclusive process by definition. That's
what inclusive means.
I feel like that's what inclusive means, yeah.
Yeah, the people.
Bring it to
involved.
The people, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was just fun to think about it, and I'm working on the Act 250, the Next 50 Years Commission, and so I started to think about that. But then I also thought about our other initiatives, like the Working Lands Enterprise,
What is that?
The Working Lands Enterprise Fund is a fund that was created by the legislature, I think over 10 or 12 years ago, to invest in businesses that were dependent upon or utilizing the working landscape. So agriculture or forestry related businesses that needed a little boost to help get them started or to grow to the next phase. So it's a fund that's overseen by a board that was set up by the legislature to invest in our businesses to promote it. But I skipped something because the next big thing, we did Act 250, then we did the Vermont Housing Conservation Trust Fund, which was another significant investment in Vermont's sustainable landscape, and also inclusivity, because it was looking at affordable housing and making sure Vermonters could continue to purchase both housing and land in the future, right? So think about that as our next big step. Then we did the working lands, and now we're doing projects, more like project-oriented, more like farm to school. How do we get students, more people, more Vermonters eating Vermont food? So again, looking at sustainability and engaging more people in the act of, participating in their working landscape.
Because that food is really good.
And it's really good and good for you.
Yeah.
One challenge is it can be more expensive, and so that's where I think legislative initiatives can step in and help. So it was really exciting. I had a moment at the UN to talk about it, and I was part of a panel, 3 Vermonters and 3 people invited by an Iraqi foundation to talk about the role of sustainability, inclusivity, and then rural women. And it was also fascinating to think about some of the challenges that we're having that are similar to developing countries in terms of, if you think about our water quality challenges and the conflicts that we're having really around that, in particular up in Lake Carmi. So it was good to step out and put Vermont in the national and international perspective, and then just think about our work in that light. So it was really fun.
And what was the reaction?
Oh, people were super interested in how we've done it. I mean, Vermont's known around the country and potentially around the world as a leader in sustainable development and working lands and reinvesting and kind of getting people to connect with their local food shed, if you will. So I think we all learned a lot from each other. It was neat.
So is it improving the help for the local farmers?
Yeah, so the goal for is to bring agriculture, make it more sustainable, make it more fair, and meaning, yes, bring a better wage to the farmers, and then also the nonprofit that invited me to speak is called the Grace Initiative, and they are a Vermont-based NGO, but they work with healing women in war-torn areas through agriculture, so connecting them to the land, empowering them to grow their own food, but also the act of agriculture as a healing from war.
Oh.
So that's kind of where that came in. And actually there's a man in Bristol, John Turner, who's doing a similar type of work with Iraqi vets here in Bristol, on his farm, getting people's hands. There's increasing evidence that getting your hands into the soil and engaging in the act of growing your own food can be incredibly therapeutic and helpful for us. So it's exciting times.
Yeah.
In
Well,
agriculture.
I grew up on a farm. Actually, I grew up in Long Island,
Yeah.
and weekends we went to the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else was helping to run the farm.
But it was your family's farm.
It was my family's
cool.
farm,
Yeah.
the cows and the calves and the births that you watched. And then the night it burned down,
Oh.
the barn burned down. I saw it first.
Oh.
Looking out the windows, I could hardly speak. I'm trying to tell my mother that the barn is burning, and I'm going like that.
How old were you?
Oh, probably 11 or 12.
Yeah. Wow.
And so then I ran down because my mother didn't understand, so I ran down and told my father I could get it out to my father somehow.
Yeah. Maybe the running got the adrenaline out.
Yeah. And then he took off
Yeah.
and got some of the animals out, but they were on fire. The wool they were all sheep.
Oh.
So we had to shoot every one of them.
Oh.
And they were his friends. So I talk about farms.
You digress, yeah. Well, anyway, then I had to come back up. I was planning to spend the weekend in the city with my husband, but then we voted that Friday. This was a Thursday talk. We drove down Thursday morning and back Friday morning so that I could be back in that building to vote on Friday afternoon for the gun legislation that we just talked about.
Oh, yeah.
So no long weekend, but back to vote. So
Yeah.
that was good.
So what was the vote? I forgot.
I want to say it was 85 to 50 something.
Uh-huh.
You know, it was long on Friday and then again on Tuesday, long and late.
At night.
Yeah, yeah. We got done, I think, at 9:30 Friday.
Uh-huh.
After starting at 9:30 Friday.
Yeah, that takes a lot out of
That's
you.
a long day.
Yeah, it's a long day, and it's always busy and always doing something.
Always busy and also not busy. You know how that is.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So other things I'm working on, I'm chairing the Act 250, the Next 50 Years Commission, and we're kind of fully engaged even though we're during the session. We're not officially meeting, but we have 5 subcommittees that are meeting.
Well, what do they do?
What does they do?
Yeah, what is...
So in 1970, Act 250 was passed, and so we're moving up quickly on to the 50th anniversary of it. And the idea with this commission is to actually engage Vermonters to talk about what the future of the Vermont landscape should be, what we want it to be. And
Which could be different than from 50 years ago.
correct. I think it will be some different, but a lot of the same.
Yeah.
Act 250 is incredibly prescient. I mean, it's doing really pretty well, but it's a chance for us to look at our statewide land use regulation and reevaluate. As you know, I'm sure that it was originally intended to have planning be part of it. That has significantly fallen by the wayside, and so we're going to look at that and see if, given the fact that we have a lot more information today about our landscape, does it make sense for us to try to integrate some level of planning back into Act 250? A lot of work has been done since then around regional and town planning, so it's not like we're not planning. It's just there hasn't been a push to do looking at, because Act 250 is really intended to look at regional impacts of larger developments. And so when you want to do that, what are the regional resources that you also want to be protecting when you look at those regional impacts?
You mean like water?
Water.
Yeah.
Is a big one. Forested blocks, like large areas of forest land, and the connectors that link them up for wildlife to make them useful. Agricultural land. Agriculture has significantly been, the uses of it have been exempt from Act 250. We're going to be looking at exemptions. We're going to be looking at climate change.
Because it's different than 50 years ago.
Yes, it's very different than 50 years ago. And is there a way for us to integrate our statewide land use development review, or to integrate climate into that level of review? Is it integrated at local and regional levels already? We're going to do a sort of an overall assessment of the health of the goals of Act 250 and then the efficacy of meeting those goals, and then make recommendations in a final report due in December for the legislature to consider legislation this coming biennium.
Oh, that's quite important.
Yes,
Yes.
I think it's going to be important, and I'm excited. We start the public outreach. We're just about to hire a facilitator, and we start public outreach in June. We'll have 6 formal meetings around the state, but we're also going to have an online place for people to answer our survey and engage, and hopefully regional commissions and local groups can sponsor their own meetings and give us feedback as well.
Well, that's also very important, to have the feedback of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Found that out
Yeah.
very early in life.
Yeah. So that's the whole focus of it. And actually, on the Vermont Planners Association is starting their annual conference this year is going to be focused on it. So we'll get a bunch of people who are using Act 250 on a regular basis in their professional lives to provide us feedback through that conference venue. coming up in May. So feels good. A lot of people are really interested and excited. We have 14 advisors. As I mentioned, we have 5 subcommittees who are working right now during the session to address those issues we talked about, and then we'll take it to the people and see what they think.
And then what you come up with after
that.
Well, you come up with a draft for the people to look at, right?
Well,
then get changes there.
Right. So what we're going to do is, that's what we're working on now, is kind of within the frame of the ideas we have on the table, give the public some things to respond to in the public outreach, but also keep it open so that if people have new ideas they want to bring to us, we're open to that. And then, then we'll go into report and recommendations.
Sometimes you're surprised at what the public comes up with.
Yeah.
That you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it is important that the public become involved, and I'm glad. Will you put when these hearings are held in the newspaper or on the?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
and they'll be on our webpage, and we'll have press releases. Mm-hmm.
And what's your wedge page?
Our webpage is actually.
No, I mean I know what it is, but how do you get there?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to tell you. Well, you go to the Vermont Legislature, and there should be a link on the right on commissions. But then if you look under committees, if you don't find it there, it's under committees and joint committees, special committees.
Mm-hmm.
Needs to get to be more straightforward how to get there, but it's very helpful once you find it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it has all the information that you need to say, oh, no, that's no good. Oh, that's all right. And that's very good.
It will have that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So, you hope not so many not so goods.
Yeah, right. So we can talk a little bit about what's happening in some of the committees right now. There is actually Senator Bray's S-260 water quality funding bill, which currently does not have a water quality funding mechanism in it. It has a study committee in it. But not sure about the House's appetite for studying water quality funding again. I think the House is poised to try to find a way to actually fund water quality cleanup. So we'll see what the House Natural Resources Committee can do to find a way to actually fund water quality cleanup instead of studying it. But right now that bill does have a long-term, or not a long-term, but a study in it, creation of a commission to study how to fund it. That's been a really big challenge, as you know.
Yeah, money always is.
Money always is. But I think Vermonters are ready. We need to get money to our towns to help them with the town roads.
Yeah.
And certainly, we did pass a bill out of the House. We'll see what the Senate does with this to create a designation of a lake in crisis in response to Lake Carmi's situation, which is pretty bad up there in Lake Carmi. And we've designated Lake Carmi as the first lake in crisis. And that allows the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources to really focus resources on a particular water body until we see notable progress on it.
What does crisis mean?
Crisis in
this particular kind of...
In this particular instance, it means the blue-green algae blooms that have been happening up in Lake Carmi and making the lake not only unswimmable, but also a health hazard. So it's really polluted with phosphorus, and it's creating these algae blooms that make the lake unusable. And the folks up there are at their wits' end. Because
they need the water.
They need the water. It's also, it's a lot of summer camps, so it's a recreational resource,
Yeah. Oh, it's swimming.
And we deserve to have clean water.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
That bill's gone over to the Senate, but we'll see what they can find, what they can do with that. Another natural resources bill that's in play is S-285, a solid waste bill. So you were in the House when the solid waste bill passed that was requiring mandatory composting. And the devil has been in the details around how to get that to work, particularly in more rural towns for people who get their trash picked up, but it's still pretty spread out and not a lot of concentrated, waste collection. So they're looking at ways to get. There's some composting businesses that actually want to just focus on collecting that compost waste, and so they're looking at ways to change that statute to make it a little bit more user-friendly. And interestingly, that bill includes something that I know I've heard from a number of constituents on over the years, but how to get the state to get to the unclaimed bottle deposits. It's about $2 million a year of nickels that go right back to the distributors right now. And this bill has found a way to recapture that and bring it back to the state.
Oh,
and
that hasn't been put into existence yet.
Not yet, but I think it's going to happen in this bill. And then
can you tell me what that means?
That means that the taxpayers would get those nickels instead of the distributors would get them. And I don't know beyond that if it would come into the general fund. But
would it be good to have the towns or the state get that money so that they can do bigger things?
Well, it's $2 million a year, but it could be earmarked for something. I mean, maybe it could be earmarked to help with the rest of the solid waste problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of each individual getting $10 or $5.
Right. Well, it would come back to the general fund. So then also in that there's talk of banning single-use plastic bags or single-use bags in general, actually. So sort of an omnibus solid waste bill is what that's becoming. The minimum wage bill has come over from the Senate and is in the General Housing and Military Affairs Committee, and they are taking testimony on that. The governor's pretty lukewarm on it. But it was a priority for the Senate. And kind of interesting factoids that I got along with it are that a basic needs budget for 2016, a single person would have to earn $17.64 an hour to actually meet the basic needs budget in an urban area of Vermont.
You mean for the person?
For the person. And we're
to pay all his bills.
Pay all of his bills, yep.
Needs
$17.64, and we're talking about raising it to $15. So, and it's a little bit less in a rural area. It's $15 in a rural area, but $15.76. So we'll see if that bill can get through the House this year.
Is there much opposition to it?
I think there's a lot of support in the House, but I think, well, like I said, the governor's opposed to it. So I don't know. Even if it gets through the legislature, I don't know if it has a future.
Well, the legislature can override.
They could if there was that much. I'm not sure there's that much support for it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a vote on party lines.
Yeah.
Predominantly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds to me like a pretty good bill.
Yeah, I support it.
Yeah.
For sure, yes. I definitely support it. Then in the Commerce Committee, we are working on, I heard from constituents on this one too, the Fair Repair Act.
Fair repair.
Yeah, so it's a bill that creates a task force to look at electronics, to require manufacturers to provide the ability to repair rather than replace electronics. So instead of planned obsolescence, throw it away, allowing people to actually be able to unscrew the screws on the back. This is what I'm imagining. Get inside and change a battery, or get inside, if you have a digital watch, you can take it to a jeweler and they're very kind to replace the battery, but it's virtually impossible to do on your own at home. If you've ever tried it.
No, I've never tried it, and I have had lucky at having long batteries, long living batteries.
Does that mean you've never replaced one?
Oh yeah, no, I have. Yeah. But
No, they do. They tend to last a very long time. And then this week in my committee, we're looking at a bill that will make it easier for small businesses to interface with the state government by having a single portal for everything, actually. And as I mentioned at the start of this, I was out all last week sick, but I'm intrigued by this, and we're going to be taking a lot of testimony on it. It's a bill that came over from the Senate, so if we can find a way to concur or agree with it, then it's something that I suspect we could move this year. It's interesting being on Commerce, finding ways to make it easier for Vermont businesses to do business. So
yeah,
that's what we've been working on. We also had a consumer protection bill that we are being challenged by currently. We can't seem to get this one. We have 18 versions of it coming, but it's a consumer protection bill to protect consumers from huge interest accruing on credit card debt, and also make it more fair the way that people can access your other assets in order for you to pay those bills. So it's sort of a fairness.
Are the businesses are trying to get, the people who have the, just went psst.
The credit card companies?
How, yeah, well, yeah, the credit and the bill and the interest that's paid. The interest should be quite low to me.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. Speaking of interest, 12%, and that's considered reasonable. On credit card debt, yeah.
It should
It's
be
capped.
5 or 6 or 7.
Right. It should be the kind of going Fed rate plus a couple percentage points or something, right? But
yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And I've come into this committee mid-session, so I do a lot of catch-up, but I would say that is considered a success that it's capped at 12% in this bill.
Yeah. Was it capped at something higher before this bill?
I'm thinking it probably was, yeah.
Well, that's pretty high
Yeah.
for a credit card. Makes you want to not use a credit card.
Use it very carefully so you can pay it off.
Yeah, pay it off in a month or at least 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Other things we're working on is enabling blockchain technology, which sounds more complicated than it is, but it's sort of been touted as the new captive insurance for Vermont. You know, the captive insurance industry, Vermont got ahead of the curve of other states and set up a really good regulatory system and created the enabling businesses to do business here, and it's been very successful. So we're looking at ways we could enable that for blockchain. Blockchain. It's a computer technology for essentially encoding your data, protecting your data and spreading it out, but it's associated with Bitcoin, but that's just one use of it.
I don't put any data on my computer. I don't have to worry about it.
Right. But anyway.
So, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And that was all very interesting.
You're welcome.
Having been in the legislature, it's good to hear what's going on in there.
Yeah, great.
Firsthand.
Thanks for having me, Betty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.